What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 5th episode of Grasping Neurology, where we're going to be taking our first in-depth look at sleep. And before we actually talk about sleep mechanisms and what's going on, there's two major myths I think that we need to dispel so that the bias doesn't get in the way of trying to learn stuff later in the video. The first one is that your sleep should be standardized at 8 hours a night and look at it on a nightly basis. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We know for sure that we can accumulate sleep debt. And if you can accumulate debt, that means you can logically pay it off as well. So sleep's really measured, especially in research, over the course of a week. And you should cumulatively be aiming to get more than 50 hours, up to 55 or 56 on average. If you're an athlete who's near peak performance, or if you're learning something new and you also have a lot on your plate at once, anything of that sort, you can absolutely gain benefit from sleeping up to 64 hours, and this has been validated by research. Secondly, it's that sleep is standardized. Once your head hits the pillow, the same thing happens every single night, and some ambiguous stuff about growth hormone, and then you wake up in the morning. And that also couldn't be further from the truth. It turns out that this is actually part of what our circadian rhythm does, or our brain's internal sleep-wake cycle. It's actually a cohort of data collecting analysts that figure out what's going on throughout the day, to what degree, what novelty, and how it's taxing us, as well as what's your nutrition and everything else like throughout the day that feeds back into you. And how does that add up to this equation of, as you get ready for bed, what needs to be dealt with? This is actually done by our pons. Our pons auto-regulate sleep by determining the needs for REM and deep sleep mainly when it comes to this restorative world. So REM sleep is very interesting because that's what we associate with dreams. And I want to paint a very clear picture of what's going on with REM sleep because I feel like there's a lot of ambiguity behind the term REM sleep in general. What makes these dreams occur is that we actually have excitatory neurochemistry happening, meaning the same cholines and norepinephrines and neurochemical agonists that are active during the day are active when you're dreaming as well. This goes along with some melatonin and other peptides like delta sleep-inducing peptide that keep you in a somewhat paralytic-like state so that you're not bodily awake and certainly not, hopefully not, ventilating like you're awake, but there is neurochemistry going on upstairs. And what's happening there is it's actually resensitizing our ability to use those same excitatory chemicals, neurotransmitters, and agonists during the day. What this is referred to as is noradrenergic inhibition. It's a fancy term for talking about the acute sensitivity and functionality of the noradrenergic receptor, which is where we have norepinephrine and other catecholamines bind to. Essentially, the ligands that are active when you're sleeping are actually relieving the stress on that receptor or those employees so that they can be active during the day. So this is a very specific type of brain fog that you can deal with that also has a very specific way to be dealt with, which is awesome. And you can go ahead and almost immediately reference the lion's mane video, and this will be improved in as little as 24 hours. Deep sleep, on the other hand, is much more truly restorative to the entire body, whereas you might have noticed that although there's other benefits I didn't mention to REM sleep, it's pretty specific to stuff up here. Deep sleep is going to encompass the immune system to a greater degree, the spinal cord, as well as what happens in our muscles. So it's really cool to see that there's this also shifting of sleep within the cycles. So you can go into deep sleep where you're going to see the lowest heart rates typically. You're going to have almost zero brain activity. And this is where there's, like I said, true system-wide restoration going on. This is also what sets the foundation for these structural changes in learning. So when you're taking the hammer to that red-hot sword, that can only be properly done with deep sleep. So deep sleep is the coolant in this scenario for learning and getting that red hot sword able to be turned hot again tomorrow for new changes via that hammer. Because we've talked about, if you make too much change at once, it actually makes the sword brittle, and that learning will not occur the same way. So this first video of sleep was meant to give you an idea of sleep is specific and a week-long process that combats the stressors and things you impose on yourself every day along the way of that week.